Welcome, audience. I'm glad you're here because honestly, we need to talk. I don't care if it gets me canceled. It's high time we had a conversation about something I see in the comments every day, and that is the recommendation of a certain type of creature from 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons. Yes, it's true that I ask you all for recommendations for monsters to feature on this channel, and yes, it's true that many of the monsters I talk about have their roots in 3rd edition D&D, but this is not okay. But it's just a stat block. What's the big deal? What's the big deal? Let me explain something to the folks who never played 3rd edition D&D. Something that 5e stat blocks do very well is the accumulation of information. If you look at even the most complex high CR 5e monster, everything you could possibly need to know is on this page, with one exception being the description of the monster's spells. And despite this, people still complain about having to actually look that stuff up manually, which is why instead of giving monsters 1 or 2 spells it can cast, if those spells can simply be represented as an ability, they often are, which is correct. But in 3rd edition, we did things a little differently. Monsters still had spells like they do now, but sometimes they would have 2 different spell lists, some of which were spells they could cast as if they were a certain level in a player class, and some of which that were spell-like abilities, which we now call innate spells. So have fun tracking those lists separately, but that's not all. Some creatures have special qualities, which are sometimes explained in the monster's stat block. Other times it'll just say something like, this functions as a 10th level bard. Okay, sure, I guess I can just look up the bard class to figure that one out, but that must be it, right? Wrong, not even close. We're just getting started. Ever seen a monster stat block with feats? Not like this, you haven't. Most 3.5 monsters have a list of feats which inform some of the things it can do, which again, you gotta look up to figure out how they work. And then there's special actions, which are sometimes in the stat block, or again, it'll just say something like, turn undead 8 times per day as a 10th level cleric. So you know, just another thing to look up, I guess. And sometimes you'll even have a unique ability that you think is going to be explained, but then halfway through the explanation it just says, the monster can do this thing mentioned in this other book, but with these exceptions, never mind what the actual thing is though. And don't even get me started on advancement by hit dice or God forbid by fucking character class. Now listen, I love 3rd edition D&D. It was my first experience with the game, and I think it's a really solid RPG. And while there are lots of things about it I do miss and try to incorporate into my own 5e games, there are other things that belong in the past, and the way stat blocks used to be is in my top 1 things that make me feel like I'm yelling about kids these days not knowing how good they have it. Back in my day, it took 25 minutes to figure out how a monster above CR 10 worked, and we liked it. Now, all of these issues are things that can be overcome with relative ease, and when I'm converting a monster from 3rd to 5th, a lot of what that entails is figuring out which of the monster's feats and abilities actually matter and translating them into how that would be represented in 5th edition. Does a monster have the improved initiative feat? Easy, we just give it proficiency in initiative. Does it have the negotiator feat? Cool, give it expertise in persuasion. But sometimes I will get a recommendation to convert a monster that has a stat block so f***ing convoluted that instead of bankrupting myself with the legal fees it would cost to have a fleet of rules lawyers sift through it all, I just walk away. If the monster's actually cool though, I usually set it aside into the pile of shame until I have ample time to do all the research required to do the creature justice, and I never complain about it in my content because I'm just graceful like that. But today, I am gonna show you not only one of the most egregious examples of everything I just mentioned, but also what has to be one of the weirdest creatures ever printed in an official product. I'd like to introduce you to the Harmonious Choir of the Words. That's not a flowery descriptor. I swear to God, that's what this monster is called. So what exactly is a Harmonious Choir of the Words? Well, it's a celestial that looks like a human face made of light, which is surrounded by a series of ever-changing sentences written in light and transcribed in every language to ever exist. Obviously. I don't know what was happening in March of 2007. I was 13 and playing a scientifically astounding amount of Halo 2, but apparently the people working at Dragon Magazine were beginning to dabble with crack cocaine because the bestiary in that month's issue is certifiably insane. The artwork of the Harmonious Choir of the Words is pretty cool, and it is what first caught my eye, but then I began to look at what it can do, and I could feel my soul attempting to escape my body. The Thing stat sheet is basically just a wall of referential abilities that refer to other abilities, all of which take you to source books other than the one you're looking at, because it's an issue of Dragon Magazine. This monster entry makes reference to not one, not two, not three, but 4 different books, one of which is another issue of Dragon Magazine. Like, sure, you probably own a copy of the Player's Handbook. You maybe even own the Book of Exalted Deeds, and you maybe own Song and Silence. But unless you happen to have issue 312 of Dragon Magazine kicking around, you're cooked. I mean, I know we can rely on the internet to do a lot of heavy lifting now, and even in 2007, this wasn't entirely untrue, but come on, dude, what are we doing here? Anyways, upon looking up all of that stuff, I finally had somewhat of an understanding about what a Harmonious Choir of the Words even is, and it's kinda sick. As mentioned, these guys are small celestials made of light and are neutral good, so they chill in the parts of the upper planes that aren't just filled with winged cops, but are still legally good guy hangouts. They literally are the language of creation, and they act as manifestations of language given life through the profound power of the language of creation itself. They are generally happy little spirits who spend most of their time organizing knowledge in true librarian-esque fashion. Sometimes they literally are librarians working away in major centers of knowledge. Other times they just collect stories and house them within themselves. But what they all have in common is a love for those stories and a deep desire to hear them all. They also love conversation, though unlike many creatures who fit into this niche of learned scholar, they are not the least bit bothered by talking to a creature who is much less intelligent or informed than themselves. They derive just as much joy from a back and forth of debate and ideas as they do from explaining to the party barbarian what a pronoun is. They also love to sing, and they regularly do so while they work. But their singing isn't just for merrymaking, they can do some cool magic stuff, kinda like a bard. But before we get into that, I gotta give a massive shout out to this week's sponsor, Scorched Basin. Scorched Basin is a sweet TTRPG project that I was fortunate enough to contribute to. It's 1 part Mad Max, 1 part Dune, and entirely a TTRPG setting being created by Homie and the Dude, which is gonna be bringing some high-octane desert punk adventure to a game table near you. Scorched Basin is the site of a massive meteor impact that has enough depth to be run as the entirety of your game world, or as something which you can drop into your existing campaign, making it as micro or as macro as you need. Homie and the Dude invited a ton of content creators to do voice lines for some of the NPCs in order to build up a sweet sound bank for inspiration and use at the table. And I had the honor of being Kai Knight number 4, one of many soldiers who fight and die for the Emperor of a magitechnocratic city-state. When they become a knight, their tongues get cut out, so they use these magical little voice transcoder thingies to pull words from a pre-approved bank of phrases, which has led to them sort of developing their own language of half phrases and pseudo concepts, kind of like Thieves' Cant, but way weirder. So if you want to use my voice at your game table to make an NPC say words to your players, check it out. The project is super cool, the art is really unique and stylistically awesome, and I am so excited to get my hands on it when the book is done. Also, instead of investing money in ads on Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, and wherever else people get told to buy things, these guys are doing a straight up 50-50 revenue split with all the creators that are helping them spread the word about their new project. As long as you're using the link in the description down below, literally half of the profit goes to supporting me in this channel. This is honestly a huge risk on their part because just splitting the profits with creators instead of buying ads isn't really something that's been done before as far as I know, so I would love to see them succeed here, and I hope this becomes more of a thing if it does. Anyways, thank you so much to Homie and the Dude and their new project, Scorched Basin, for bringing us here today to talk about whatever the hell this is. Now back to the Singing Angel face. Their Harmonious Aura trait gives a +2 to everyone within 20 feet on armor class and saving throws, and they have a reaction they can take when someone fails a d20 test within 60 feet of them that allows them to add a d10 to the result. Sort of like a bard and a paladin had a weird baby. They do also have a ton of spells available to them, many of which can be cast at will, such as Daylight, Detect Thoughts, Detect Magic, Dispel Magic, Mage Hand, Mending, Message, Speak with Dead, and my all-time favorite, Legend Lore. Legend Lore is a great spell for non-combat and story uses on a good day, but the Harmonious Choir of the Words has a great use for it in combat as well. See, they have this bonus action called Utterance of Truth, which allows the choir to speak the true name of a creature to do one of the following things: strip it down of all damage resistances, give it disadvantage on everything, or cast planar binding on them as an action. However, in order to do this, it has to know the creature's true name, which it may or may not already know, but if it doesn't, there's a chance it could learn that information by casting Legend Lore, assuming the creature is notable enough and the information exists somewhere. And I think that's pretty dang cool, but that is not all as far as spells go. 3 times per day, it can cast Blindness, Deafness, Calm Emotions, Confusion, Glyph of Warding, Major Image, Remove, Curse, Sleep, and Slow. And once per day, it can cast Modify Memory, Power Word Fortify, Power Word Stun, and Prismatic Spray. Also, it's got a light ray attack that does an average of 38 radiant damage, which seems like a lot, but for a CR 11 creature, it's pretty par for the course. The Harmonious Choir of the Words is definitely at its best when it has a bunch of allies around it that it can be buffing and supporting, but even on its own, this thing is no joke. It's got incorporeal movement, which goes crazy, and it straight up can't be affected by necromancy spells, which is real nice. However, its most insane ability is definitely the Incarnate Vessel action. This action works more or less the same as the Ghost's Possession ability, except it has a way higher DC and it can target any humanoid within 300 feet of itself. Now obviously it can do this in a hostile way to take over a target's body, but it most often possesses a creature with the intent of simply tagging along and helping that creature out so long as it agrees with what it's doing and taking over the controls if the creature strays from the path. Think of it like being in a warlock pack, except your patron is literally inside your body. Often it's a willing possession, and that is where this creature shines in a really unique way, you know? Aside from all the absolutely insane bullshit we've been talking about for the past 10 minutes. By possessing a willing creature and augmenting their abilities with its own, you can have a potential low-level character occupied by a tremendously powerful entity, and that's always really fun. Maybe one of your party members who is on the path to darkness gets possessed by this thing, and it promises the creature their free will back, and maybe a little help now and then along the way, so long as they stick to the straight and narrow. Or maybe it's possessing the body of a bard who acts as a conduit to the upper planes by singing songs of great prophecy, all of which come from the Harmonious Choir of the Words they house within. Or perhaps the creature is being controlled by a powerful spellcaster with ill intent who wishes to use the choir's power for their own ends. These creatures also make for great messengers of the gods and can deliver any message in a way that the party is not gonna forget, maybe even sticking around inside one of the group to make sure the message is acted upon accordingly. If you want them to make more of a cameo appearance, having the head librarian of a major library somewhere in the outer planes or even in a big library on the material plane could be really cool. If nothing else, it would make for a unique NPC, though I do also like the idea of a Harmonious Choir of the Words being an active librarian in a library at the center of a ruined city. They never leave the library, so they have little idea of what's going on outside, but are very grateful to the players for visiting, maybe even offering them a quest of some kind. They could almost fulfill the same sort of role as Guilty Spark in the Halo franchise. You could go all the way with that and make them truly unhinged after so long in solitude, or you could just have them be a fluttering ball of light that is actually helpful. I just can't believe I somehow found a way to make 2 Halo references in one video about Dungeons and Dragons. Topical. As creatures with such a focus on language and song, they can also make for fantastic members of a celestial court, fulfilling the role of a court advisor, jester, or even both. I do like the idea of playing one of these guys as just a big time jokester. They just love telling and hearing jokes because that's their special interest for whatever reason. Honestly, they'd probably get along great with pink dragons. And I do feel like you could also pretty easily reskin this creature to be either a fae or some kind of primordial demon with basically the same abilities but more of a sinister or mischievous bend. In fact, the Harmonious Choir of the Words would make for a fantastic archfey. They've already got the goofy ass name covered and everything. As much as I think this creature is absolutely wacky for so many reasons, it's genuinely really cool, and I am so curious to know if any of you have ever even heard of this thing or played in games where they made an appearance for that matter. And if you've run this creature as a DM playing 3rd edition, you're a hero, and you should be treated as such. But if you want to run this creature in 5e D&D, check out the description down below for all the game rules and lore stuff 100% for free, and check out the Dungeon Dad Patreon for the high-res PDF version of the stat block, which is not 100% free, but is 200% appreciated by me and my dog, because that's how I pay for his treats. And a special shout out to our patron of the week, which today is Keeper Plays. Thank you so much to Keeper Plays for the support and helping me continue to play the game of life. And thank you so much for watching. I truly do appreciate it. Couldn't do this without you. And that ultimately wraps up the Celestial episode of our little mission to get caught up on all of the creature types I've been neglecting, which means next week we'll be taking a look at a plant. So get your gardening gloves ready, because it's a creepy little fella. But that's all I got for today. I'll see you then.
Who's that monster of the week?